So really delighted to have this amazing panel of experts here, specifically to bring the outside expertise from the world of what it is we need to be doing, we could be doing better here at ET Austin, from the perspective of employers, from the perspective of industry and government, of course nonprofits as well. So we're thinking really broadly about the role of AI in education, especially in preparing the next generation of the workforce. So really delighted to be joined by Michael Redding, is a senior technical product manager at Indeed, and also the chair of the advisory council for the School of Information, which we really appreciate here at UT Austin. So plays an important role at the university and the iSchool. Then we have Amanda Crawford. She is the executive director of the Texas Department of Information Resources and the chief information officer for the state of Texas. And she also serves on the AI Advisory Council for the state of Texas, which is eager to hear more about the work that council's done, but doing really important work about how the state can be appropriately, including ethically and responsibly, leveraging AI in its business. And then Robin Lerner, who is a senior director for academic engagement at Microsoft, and is heading up the Microsoft AI Economy Institute. So really innovative work that Microsoft is doing across a wide range of sectors with universities around the world, actually, thinking about what the future of the AI economy is, and bringing together experts from across many different disciplines in academia, as well as experts from across Microsoft and across many different aspects of Microsoft. So really excited, delighted to have these great panelists here. And again, thank you all for joining us. I'm Ken Fleischman, professor in the School of Information and founding chair of Good Systems. So I wanted to start with what y'all see as the future of work in the AI era. How do you think, how might, for students who are thinking about entering the workforce for the first time in, in a week or in a year or in a couple of years, how that might look different as a result of AI?
I'll take that first. I think the short answer is we don't know, right? Like, the technology that we have available to us is changing so rapidly. If you'd asked me 6 months ago, I'd have said, oh, you need to have good skills in sort of understanding, how AI is hallucinating and deductive reasoning. I think it's still important. You look at models like Gemini's, like Deep Research, and some of the new stuff that's coming online now, and it's like, oh, actually, like, they're becoming even more powerful. You still need to have, I think, that like deep, like, not sort of the like deep understanding of all the topics, but like the flexibility and the knowledge skills of like, oh, is this right? Is this how I want to structure the thing that I'm trying to do? And just like the flexibility to like learn new tools, right? Right before this, I was talking to a vendor that was bringing online some new tools for software developers, and they claim, we don't know, but they claim that 80 to 90% of all of the code that they write internally is being written by AI now, right? You compare that to other public statements from other companies, and it's like, wow, that's an order of magnitude 2x, 3x over what other folks are doing now. And if that's true, like, that just changes the job of a software engineer, right? So it's important to learn how to be a software engineer if you want to be a software engineer. Your job will not be that in 2 years, right? So you need to have the flexibility and the skills to be flexible as new tech comes online.
Well, hi, and thank you for having me here. Thank you also, and hats off to Ken for remembering all the titles. So well done, because that's a lot. But I think one of the things with this, what I see as the potential, and obviously it depends on what sector you're in, right, and what specialties that you might have in looking at this. But to me, I think the rapid deployment of especially generative AI and where it's going now with agentic and everything else. Um, we're still what we really need and what we see over and over is a desperate need for people who truly are problem solvers and critical thinkers. And I think that that is a thing that we need more than anything, because to me, the potential for AI to really change sort of the day to day of our work is taking the routine, the ordinary, the all of those things, and being able to automate, to handle those automatically, and to free us up for more human based tasks. I can't, I and I'm, there's a gentleman I heard speak once who talked about some years ago about AI, and he was talking about using AI so that you would don't be a bad robot, be a good human. And I think that that is more important than ever. So as we're freed up from the ordinary routine things, the possibility for us to really be able to solve some massive challenges and these huge problems and really rethink how we do things. And so for me and my role, and I'm thinking about government, totally reimagine how we deliver government. Um, the possibilities are there because of all the free time that now we will have, and the opportunity to really go out there and think about how we can solve, frankly, I won't even say because it's government, like the future's challenges, like, 10 years ago's challenges that we need to be able to get to. So, I think that to me is that it's that critical thinking skills.
Well, I just want to echo thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here back at UT. I am a UT mom, so I always love being here. It's hard to hear you. How about that? Did I turn it on? All right. I mean, this is a big question, Ken, and I think, we were just listening to a panel that included a student in the last panel. And I just want to recognize that AI is a tool. It's a massive new tool. And I think for students, they are here to learn some substance. And then you're throwing on them, you have to learn and be really adept at this tool. And I think exactly what you said about shifting your mindset is really, really important. And I think we need to be empathetic to people who are faced with learning this and being told that if you don't become AI fluent, you probably won't get a job. And so we're really kind of changing the goalposts on people. So it is so vital that everybody that's entering the workforce has some kind of AI fluency. What that is going to be different, but I think we need to understand the massive mind shift that comes with that. Like, what is learning? What is showing your work? What is showing your intelligence? And I want to say that LinkedIn just did a study. They do these studies on what are the skills that employers are most seeking, and happily it still is things like leadership, teamwork, communications. Those soft skills that we call those human skills are still very sought after, and we still need to be producing humans who do human things. I think how you differentiate yourself now with the tool is probably what we really need to talk about that.
Excellent. So it's a great start. And actually, along those lines, I mean, given how dynamic the environment is today, there's always this trade-off, especially in undergraduate education, between teaching students the skills they need to get the job when they graduate versus the fundamental underlying knowledge they need to sustain a successful career. And that's something in the School of Information, when we launched our new bachelor's degree in informatics in 2021, that was certainly something, as we did a wide range of different interactions and data collections with students, that they were grappling with themselves, and it's something where it's hard to align students and faculty. So what would your advice be, both to students in how they balance those, as well as to faculty in how to balance that, and how maybe more data points like the LinkedIn study of maybe supporting the idea that although skills are important, they're not everything?
Well, I think also in the last panel, somebody mentioned the Anthropic report data that just came out. about how much is AI being used in the workplace. And you know, Microsoft has done the same thing with Copilot, and we know that in certain sectors there is very low usage. And in other sectors there's high, but it's still, what is the highest, like 53%? And this is, and again, it's not substitution, it's your co-pilot, right? It's working next to you. So we still, you know, I'm biased, but I work with academic, I'm not a tech, I'm not an engineer, but we still need people to be innovating on what we need to know, right? We're not gonna not, we're curious beings. And we're going to walk around and observe and be curious about that. So we have to continue to have humans that are seeing the world and seeing the world through all these various ways. We've got to continue, universities have got to continue to support that, the curiosity and the inquisitive thinking, and not stifle that while understanding how to interact with this AI. And one of the things that drives me nuts is we don't really define what we mean by AI when we talk about students using it. And I think the average student is like, it's ChatGPT, right? That's going to be the average, what you visualize. But we're sitting here thinking about so many other things, right? And so I think how we direct that for these students, like, what do you mean by AI? What is AI? The student that was up here before, she was talking about all these wonderful tools, and she definitely was not replacing her knowledge. She was using this to learn her substance. Yeah, I think we have got to do a better job in kind of exploring with our students what AI really is, and because you talked about how it's going to solve the greatest challenges of the world, but right now a lot of students are just afraid of it and are afraid of being the one that's left behind that gets the lower grade because they're not using it.
Well, I think so, and also I think it's also to clear. I don't know that AI will solve our greatest challenges, but being freed up to use your brain to solve the better challenges, and maybe it will. Time will tell. I'm sure in 3 weeks it'll all change, and we'll have different talking points on this. And I think that is part of it. Is we've all seen disruptors, but this has truly been such a disruptive technology, and how it's evolved so rapidly. One of the things we do at my agency is we do a lot of reports and a lot of studies and looking at the different agencies across state government and ask them a variety of questions on technology. And 2 years ago, 2.5 maybe, on this study we asked about AI, and did they feel that they had the resources and the skill sets they needed to be able to deploy AI in their environments. And I think it's like 80-something% of them said yes, they did. The survey that we just got back, so let's say 6 months ago, 37% said they had the resources they need. But that speaks to, I really think that, right, like the massive boom and the change of AI and how that's come about. And so we're really looking at that. But, kind of going on like that balance of how do you go from, specialized and knowledge-based work to other things. To me, so much of it, I think, is about, and one of the true benefits of higher education is that exposure to so many different things. And when you're looking at your degree plan and you have to take, a variety of courses and different things, and that's the beauty of higher education is exposing students to possibilities and exposing students to, different opinions and all of the different things that are out there in different disciplines, because that's really what I think is going to prepare them for whatever it is that comes about. I happen, a proud graduate of the University of Texas at Austin. I was a Spanish major, Italian minor, who became a lawyer, who now is the state CIO. Like, never when I was walking these 40 acres did I think that I was going to be, in this role. Like, not even kind of. But the ability, again, I go back to that of solid liberal arts education, which I'm all about. But that's exposure to that and the ability to pivot and critical thinking skills and all of those sorts of things that develop. I hate to keep hammering home on that, but I don't really think it's necessarily more complex than that, except at least right now with what we know for all of these things. And I think, the other thing, to your point that you had, Robin, not everybody is using it. So looking at state government, there are certain sectors in state government that are using artificial intelligence quite a bit. And then there's huge swaths of the state employee population that are not at all. And or at least not approved using it. They're probably putting something into some sort of LLM, but they're not. But it is that augmenting tool. One of the use cases that I think is interesting that we've seen is for our Department of Public Safety, and fleet vehicle maintenance. It is something that is critically important for DPS. They have, thousands and thousands of vehicles deployed across the state. They have to keep them up to date. They have to maintain them. They have to make sure it's a life and limb. It's a safety issue, and it was previously done by paper logs that took a whole lot of time, and that is how they kept up to make sure that the vehicles were updated. And then through AI tools, they're able to do that. We do predictive maintenance. They're able to see this. It's saving money, it's saving time, and it's providing public safety outcomes that we weren't previously seeing. So, different use case.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good example, and one that I've been using internally as we've been developing our own AI strategy and how we want to change the way that we work is, the job is still the same, right? It's, we need to do maintenance on state vehicles, right? It's the same job. It's been a job since the state bought its first, patrol car probably in the 30s, right? And, 50 years ago, right, the job of an accountant was, okay, now get out your big chief tablet and let's start summing up, things. And then it's like, and then Excel happened, right? And there was a turbulent period where, you had where everybody sort of learned, oh, here's what a spreadsheet is, like a program, and here's how we can like use formulas, and we're saving all this time and energy. And now, like, it's just second nature. Like, it's just become anybody that's working in tech, even if you're not an accountant, lives and breathes in Excel. Right, and it's not even for summing up anything anymore. It's your general purpose tool. And I think as we look at AI, right, like it's becoming a general purpose tool. But I think the reason why it's had this boom that maybe some other types of technology hasn't is because it's like slowly but surely, well, not slowly, quickly and surely becoming sort of an omni tool, right? And so everybody can get a little bit of value out of it in some way, and we haven't really seen that type of leap except since maybe the early part of the internet, right? And you go back to like electricity might be the last time that we had sort of an omni-tool type change in sort of technology that's available to us. And so I think, Ken, to your question, right, like students and those skills, it's like learning how to develop a new skill is a universal requirement of every job since we had jobs, right? And it's like making sure that there's the opportunity, I think, in coursework and in projects to sort of pick up those new skills. But it doesn't have to be, now I need to go sit down and learn this skill. But learning how to learn a skill is, I think, the actual really critical thing. Because the underlying jobs will be the same jobs. They just will be done in a very different way.
Awesome, great points. Thank you all so much. I wanted to go back to something that you said, Amanda, about whether or not, their bosses know they're using AI. They're probably using AI in some way. I gave a talk at the annual meeting of the conference on urban counties here in Texas, and so the director of, this is for all the judges and for their staffs that are the administrators for urban counties across the state of Texas. And the director, in introducing me, was saying to all these judges, now, you may not think your employees are using AI. They are, whether or not you're directing them to, and but they may be using it in, if you aren't giving them, similar to the discussion around education, if you aren't giving them warranted, clear paths to use AI appropriately, they're still going to be using AI. It just might not be as appropriate, et cetera. So I'm wondering for all of you, in terms of the responsible AI education piece, and making sure that, we're thinking about this in terms of students using AI responsibly in the classroom, but we're also thinking about this in terms of workers using AI responsibly in the workplace. And one of the use cases was, what if a county official is putting a bunch of sensitive health data into ChatGPT or some other LLM that's without any kind of safeguards whatsoever, and just sharing all this private information that will probably be hallucinated in response to some future query that someone's going to put in. So, what do you think are the really critical things in terms of responsible AI education that students need to learn?
So one of the, and Michael and I were talking about this a little bit before we started, is a little bit of the difference with government, and in dealing with public sector and private sector. And it's not to say that there's not trust issues that are imperative for the private sector. Don't get me wrong at all when I say that, but it's a little bit different with government and with the public sector. And I frequently say this to a lot of the vendors that come to us and want to sell us a cool shiny tool, and then I ask them questions, and sometimes it's things they've never thought about before, about why it's different in the public sector. And I think it can best be likened to, government's a monopoly. Right, and you have to deal with us. You have no choice. You probably don't want to deal with government. I'm in government and I don't really want to deal with government, but you have to. And government's going to take your data. You don't have a choice. And we take it and we hold it. And sometimes, and we can get into a whole discussion about data, which we know is underpinning of AI and all, but it has been something we've been pushing for a long time. And thankfully, because of AI, I think data is finally getting its day in the sun. And all of our data management officers and our scientists and the folks pushing on governance are like, yeah, we should be asking questions about why are we taking this? What's our authority? How long are we holding it? Where are we storing it? All of those basic privacy data questions for all this, because we are stewards of this public data, and it is imperative that we take care of it. So aside from cybersecurity and the other issues that are there, it is, to your point, and the urban judges and talking about that, it is relatively easy for somebody to take highly sensitive information and plop it up in an LLM, and it's out there. And we've all read, use cases and all sorts of, horror stories where this has happened. And so from the education piece, and a lot of it comes from a misunderstanding of what the technology is, of really not understanding how it works. And so what we've done, we had a couple years ago, we launched a data literacy program through our agency. Y'all are welcome to check it out. It's both for the layperson and then for data practitioners. It's on our YouTube site for dir.texas.gov. If you go there, you can see it. We have that. We're building an AI literacy program with the same things in mind. So it would be for the everyday user, and then for the business deciders, and then for the practitioners. But around that, the other thing that we've tried to do for education and outreach with our agency is we've established an AI user group for public sector participants, and it's for state and local. And I think we're pushing 700 members now in about a year and a half. And they get together virtually for all those folks and share best practices and templates. Because right now, what we've been trying to do is try to stay ahead of the curve on this, knowing that we have a legislature that's currently meeting, and we don't know what that regulatory framework will necessarily look like until post-session, again, because of the massive speed of this technology. So, education around all of that is where we're pushing.
Yeah, I think that's a very similar tactic to what we're doing, at least in Indeed and in the private sector a little bit. Is, we've had for many years, an acceptable use policy that it's the training that everybody clicks through and never reads, right? What we've done is we've really tried to enhance that with sort of AI acceptable use, like responsible AI usage. We're subject, as an international company, right? Like the EU is bringing online their AI Act. So we also have like some regulatory, challenges internationally, and different jurisdictions have different laws. Sometimes those laws are contradictory. That's fun. And so that's a real challenge. And so what we're trying to do is, it's like, how do we, as we think about our upskilling, how are we introducing sort of like the highest of high level fundamentals, and then for specific roles layer in sort of, here's how you use this for your role in a way that will make you more productive, but also like mitigate that risk. And I think the challenge, right, in sort of the space is those risk vectors are changing, right? And you know, it for us, you know, we're at the end of the day, Indeed is a software company. We write code, right? Right now, AI is writing a lot of that code. You know, this is opening up all sorts of interesting things in sort of IP indemnification law. And so I asked my lawyer, ChatGPT, to help me understand, you know, the current framework. And, you know, all it's going to take is one junk lawsuit, right? And it's going to change the framework again. And so, you know, the good news is where we are in our adoption journey, right? If you think about all technology adoption, it follows sort of what we call the S curve, right? And we're sort of in the early adopters. Our early adopters are pushing us to be more bleeding edge than we would be comfortable with. That's forcing us to figure out, okay, well, how do we do this safely and securely? But that lets us pull everybody else along much more quickly. And that push and pull has actually been really useful for us. Very stressful in certain things. This is a fun week for me in the world of IP identification. But that has, I think, let us bring in new technology and new ways of doing work more quickly than we otherwise would by having sort of that vocal community of practitioners, similar to what you were describing, that sort of pushing us to be further ahead than we would probably do on our own. And it's that community is really the thing that's been the key for us.
Well, I might take this in a little bit of a different turn. I mean, the more that the students of this university and all universities are interacting with AI, the more we're going to see this requirement, this vocal requirement for AI that looks like them, that represents them, that you know, I think that it reflects people, and they're going to see where that. We're going to see where it doesn't. And I think that one of the challenges is that most users or people just thinking about AI feel like they don't have an influence in it. And so you talk about responsible AI, I think there's responsible use on my part, but there's the responsible kind of development, right? And how it's out in the world. And when we hear over and over that it's a race, it's a race, it's a race, and you know, we're balancing how we do things under a regulatory framework that protects people, but yeah, we have to be on the market before our adversaries, and I don't even just mean our competitors, but our adversaries are on the market, then you're creating this kind of sense of emergency, and then I think that creates some fear for people in using it. And so I think when we come back to, you know, this university, Ken, you do a fantastic job. You're, you know, embedding ethics and these ideas into the learning of students. That's going to break down that massive barrier between me and the tech, right? And I just wanted to come back to something you said, Ken, where you're like, you know, your employees are using AI. Well, but are they? I mean, I come from a nonprofit world, and I would say that a lot of people aren't using it. Like, there's a lot of nonprofits that have policies not to use it because they're afraid of it, because they don't learn it. And it's an interesting GPT because, you know, electricity, most of us just turn on a switch. We didn't have to learn how to turn on the switch and what turning the switch on incorrectly would do. I mean, well, you know, not to stick our fingers in, you know, outlets, but you know, we turn on a switch and we change a light bulb and we open a book, right? And now we kind of we browse the internet. This technology, we should know how we're using it. And if we're going to take advantage of it, this is not Google. We're not doing a Google search, but a lot of people are using it like a Google search, right? So I think that there's still all this skilling that needs to be done for people to really get the benefit of it and then trust it and then feel like they know how to influence it.
Right. I think that's a really good point. And I think what we see internally, and even with our job seekers and employers, is like they're looking for somebody who is an expert to authorize the use, right? That's like, okay, now I have the safety I need to know that if I do it in this way, that's fine. And it's like I laugh at the electricity example because, you know, 120 years ago, right, like companies were hiring chief electricity officers so they could figure out how to bring electricity into the factory, right? And now it's like, well, just plug it in, right? And so because we're so early in this like new technology, right, like allowing, kind of creating that permission structure to say, hey, like this actually is acceptable. And I think even in the classroom, right, like, hey, here's here's like an acceptable use of technology. Here's maybe a less acceptable use of AI, and kind of helping show those examples, I think is kind of what gives permission to students and to employees and to workers on what they can and can't do, right? So a really great example, right, is, you know, if you're making a presentation for a class, right, probably should be fine to use AI generated, you know, art as part of, to make the part, to tell a part of the story, unless maybe you're in an art history class, right? And so it's like helping students understand where the boundaries are for the domain, for what the subject is, for where it is, and like then they will follow. Once you like give them that space, they will absolutely fill it and then push it probably a little over the edge of what you want them to, but like creating the space for it is I think what we're seeing. And we're seeing that internally with our employees too. Like the second, you know, our CEO, the second we got our CEO to stand up and say everybody should be using coding assistants, we went from like 20% usage to 50% usage. Then when we had our CTO stand up and say it, we went from 50% to 80%, right? And it's like we're creating the space for people to be able to do that, and that's really what people are looking for, because otherwise they'll stick with what they know.
So I really like this sort of fear factor aspect of thinking about AI, and or I think it's a fascinating topic. It makes me think actually on, I mean, something that we've been grappling with for hundreds of years but haven't really resolved is the kind of fear factor negative implications of the word ethics. That often ethics in the workplace is this sort of like, don't be unethical. So there's sort of, you don't want that word thrown around, or, you know, in relation to you. That's part of the goal, is just as long as I'm not being accused of an ethical lapse, I must be doing okay. But at the same time, you know, maybe the standard shouldn't be not doing something egregiously unethical. Maybe we should be aspiring to some kind of higher standards. I'm wondering, as we think about both our AI use and our ethics and integrity, and how those come together in terms of ethical and responsible use of AI, how we can prepare the future workforce, and what kind of demonstrations or content that we could offer here that would prepare the future workforce for how they're going to leverage AI in a way that not only doesn't break the rules, but hopefully does something to make the world a better place.
So I guess when I think ethics, particularly in this role, so it's actually ethics is one of our core values at our agency. But when we talk about it, it's more than just you know, don't break the law, don't take a bribe, you know, things like that. And part of it in government, it's sort of baked into it. But to me, when I think about it, particularly in technology, it's about it. It really boils down to the core of government and the one true service government has, which is service and customer service. And how are we ethically serving? How are we thinking of the humans behind what we do? And as part of government, because that, again, that's the one true product that we have, is really service. And so to me, I think what, you know, schools from K-12 all the way up through higher ed can do on this is focusing more on the humans and the humanity that is using the technology, the faces behind the screens, and that it's not just focusing on what the technology does, and not just, you know, and how to get to the technology and the cool ins and outs and the bits and bytes and all of those things, but what is its purpose and who are the people that it is serving? Because that is certainly a thing that we try to focus on at our agency, and as we're looking at, you know, modernization of different systems across the whole state ecosystem, you know, there are humans behind all of that, and they are very human interactions, because most of those interactions with government are highly sensitive. You're seeking benefits. It may be child support, or you're looking for a protective order. You're, you know, even taxes. Like, nobody likes, and, you know, these are highly emotional, personal things, and they impact humans. And so understanding how the technology we're deploying is going to actually impact humans and who those people are Are they living in rural communities? Are they poor? Are they marginalized? Who are the people behind the screens? I think that is something that higher education can really communicate and get through. And because we need the people who understand that in how to deploy that technology ethically.
Well, and I would just say, and the other side of that leaf is that I think you have one shot when students, like, they're here to learn, right? And most of us as adults don't spend the time to upskill ourselves. But understanding actually what the technology, the backbone of the technology, I'm going to take a different tack, because I think most people don't know what, when you say ethics, I think they're swimming in a sea that they're not certain, like, where the edge is. Like, what do you mean when you say ethics? Wait, what's the ethical dilemma in this? Like, maybe they don't know, right? And so we need to define these issues. And I think lawyers love to define issues. We like to know that we're talking about the same thing. So I think understanding, okay, so when we talk about your data, okay, what does that mean in AI? Like, what do you actually mean by that? And is that something that I need to safeguard? Okay, why? Then it's like these tools are serving some purpose, and that the tools need to serve us as humans. But I actually think that there's a lot in terms of, like, people are never going to understand what this technology is, right? We're just using it. And I think that's the danger. I think we all need to have a responsibility to actually understand what this technology is, what the backbone of it is.
Yeah, I think there's also another element to ethics, and that's sort of like the sense of self, right? And this is something that I think, as technologists, we sometimes struggle with, but like, roles are changing, right? Like, and I think this is maybe less relevant for students who are newer into the workforce, but for people who, like, their whole identity is, their whole professional identity is, I am a writer, right? Like, something like AI, like, oh, actually AI might be writing stuff. That's like a real, that's not just a an ethical issue. Like, that's an existential issue, and like that level of discomfort, right, is something that needs to be considered. And I think as we figure out how these new technologies should be used, right, that's a part of the ethics here. Is, what does it mean for somebody's professional identity, for their sense of self? And I think one of the opportunities with the student population in particular is, they don't have the long professional, in many cases, right, not all cases, but in most cases, they don't have the long professional tenure in that professional identity. And so there is an element of sort of being able to kind of shape who you want your professional identity to be without sort of the history that comes into it. And so when I look ahead 10 years from now, right, like, the most valuable new hires are going to be the ones that have the maximum flexibility, that are they see themselves as, like, this is my purpose, this is what I want to do, these are the problems I like to solve. And, like, that's going to be the core of their identity, like their professional identity, not I am an engineer, I am a salesperson, I am a whatever, because some of those jobs aren't going to look the same. They already don't look the same as they would have 5 years ago. And that flexibility in sort of like that core sense of purpose being constant, but that flexibility in how you achieve that, like, professional purpose, like, being the most flexible, that's going to be, I think, a key part here. And something that we're really looking at Indeed is, like, this is going to happen to pretty much every industry and every career and every worker. Like, all of them are going to face a version of this over the next few years.
Can I just add one thing? I also want to just acknowledge that a couple of things. One is that we're talking about the AI tools of today. We are not talking about 10 years from now or 20 or 50 years from now, right? Like, we know that this technology is adapting, right? And it's going to get smarter and smarter and smarter. And how do we define kind of what the end goal and the end state is? And I think when you talk about ethics, it's an ever-evolving question, right? The other thing is, in the world of work, we have people who are using AI in a hospital, right, in a nursing setting, and AI in housekeeping, right? And so in the last panel, the student representative was saying, like, I need to know when I walk into a class, like, what is the okay use case here, right? And I think everywhere we go, and we have to acknowledge it's going to be different, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So building on that point, Robin, wondering, thinking, I mean, we're all knowledge workers here, but AI has implications beyond knowledge work. It has potentially implications to almost every sector of employment. So, how should we be thinking about how the overall economy is going to be restructured and reshaped? Is everyone going to have their, for example, co-pilot with them, whether they are a knowledge worker or a skilled trade worker or working in logistics or what have you?
That that's probably the literal $1 trillion question. I think, so I work at Sixth and Colorado, and driving over to campus, I counted 10 Waymo, right, driverless cars. 9 of them did not have a driver. 1 of them did. Don't know what was going on with that one. That was the one that did a dangerous thing too, so that was interesting. But that's 9 cab drivers, right, that aren't driving a car, right? So that's 9 people that 2-3 years ago might have been driving an Uber, or 10-15 years ago might have been driving a taxi, right? But I think even as we see technology, even in that example, right, taxi drivers, as Uber, as Lyft, as some of these new apps came online, right, it kind of opened up access. Now there's a lot of challenges and regulatory issues and all sorts of fun things that came with that, but it also opened up to a whole lot of people sort of a new way of earning, right, and gig workers in the gig economy, and that changed, right? And driverless cars, that's an AI technology, right? That's going to change the gig economy again. And I think, we can look at this either at the micro level, right? Specific roles that might go away, specific roles that might change, right? We can look at this at the macro level, right? What happens to, downtown, right, when everybody is remote working and driverless cars, right? Like what's going to happen to, empty office space? Like, are we going to need giant skyscrapers, right? I don't know, maybe, right? And I think as we look to sort of these effects, these long-term effects of AI, right? Like, the short answer is we don't know, other than it's going to be disruptive, and based off of the trends we're seeing, it will be maximally disruptive, right? And so kind of back to the responsible ethical part of this, it's like, how do we folks that are bringing in this technology, how are we sort of helping ethically and responsibly guide to whatever comes next when, I would love to see what somebody thinks is 50 years from now in AI, because I can't picture it. Hopefully I'm long retired and, maybe hopefully dead by that point, so I don't have to deal with it. But like, that's the kind of thing where it's like, who knows? Like, honestly, who knows, right? And it will be very disruptive. Well, AI knows, yeah. That's why you should always say please and thank you to GPT.
No, Sam Altman said don't do that because it costs more money when you say please and thank you.
Well, that's not very ethical of him.
I think just on the question of like the spectrum of laborers, we talk so much about the office workers, right? And so obviously AI is a tool of productivity, should be and can be and will be for everybody, right? Like, we have this study on, for housekeepers, where, you've got these, people, largely women, pushing 30, 50-pound, trolleys to clean rooms in hotels, and like, they're just going to where people are checking out. And an AI tool can make that massively more efficient for them and save people's backs and save people's health. And that's just one example. And can you look at this a lot yourself? But I mean, the whether or not that's monetizable, I mean, that's what it comes down to, right? So I think, though, innovation happens at universities, and I think introducing that idea, because I think, again, it comes like, what are we envisioning in our minds? And we're all talking about this with some vision in our minds. And I know the labor unions are thinking about this too, and they're thinking about it because they're worried about replacement. But when we shift to augmentation, again, it's a mind shift, but then the tools, we need to be working with workers and incorporating worker voice into creating those tools. And I think also that creates the trust factor. And I think that that's for every tool, right? Like, on the ethics question too. I mean, the trustworthy technology, there's responsible, ethical, and trusted, right? That kind of all should be in the same framework. But you trust something that you maybe had a chance to impact or influence, and that looks back to you and makes sense to you. So I think that will improve that.
Yeah, I do want to say on the influence part, right? I think what I see when I talk to folks in large settings at Indeed is everybody kind of has this, oh, somebody will come along and tell us this is how it's going to change my job. But then when you talk to people one on one, they're like, oh, well, I'm really interested in this part of it, or this is something that I saw that would be really useful. And it's like, I take those things and then we incorporate that right back in. And so I think one of the big opportunities here is like we get to dictate what our future is with AI, right? Like it's not predetermined. And I think that's sort of the opportunity like for folks in this room and on the universities is like what is that future, right? Is it, is it like a techno dystopian future or is it Star Trek, right? And like that's not really preordained, right? Like we and the people who are using AI and the people that are, trying to bring AI into organizations and things like that, like we get to shape that. And in a lot of ways, like we're lucky, right? Because 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, it's going to be a lot harder to change the course, right? But when we're at the start, we get to shape that course how we want, and that's the thing. That's why I'm still doing it, right? Is because like that it really is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I think empowering people to help shape that future is going to be the key.
No, and I love your dystopian future or Star Trek. That is a good way to put it. And these questions are not new. I mean, AI is the new equation, but sort of this job replacement has been going on. Before alarm clocks, there were people and their jobs they were called knocker uppers, and because they would knock up on your window, and they had long poles and they'd walk through the streets of London and wake you up, and they got paid to do that. But and I don't mean to be flippant about that. I mean, I understand the genuine anxiety about that, and we hear it all the time. And it is something for the state workforce that is concerned about that. But I just go back to sort of my opening comments about what we are doing to free up, and then also, and I know we've not enough time to really focus on this as well. But there are other with technologies like AI or whatever the next thing is, and the emerging technologies. There's going to be a lot in the energy sector, and it's no secret to anyone in this room, obviously, about some of the energy challenges that we have here in our own state. And so, in order for this technology to be widespread, utilized, deployed, all of that, we are going to have to answer those energy challenges that we have. And so maybe leaving the please and thank you off also saves some energy on some of those questions. So that's a whole nother sector that will even open up to jobs that folks can work in.
Yeah, thanks, Meta. All right, so now we've got time for questions. We've got about 10 minutes. So feel free to step right on up to the microphone, and we'd love to take questions for everyone.
Very stimulating panel, thank you. So I think internet reinvented our world. We started outsourcing things and suddenly the world became connected. It became very global. Transportation changed supply chains when faster and faster transportation came in. So how do you see the future of work with AI? Because essentially it's going to reinvent the world. And particularly in government is a very procedural animal. It's not about really the purpose, which is often forgotten by different departments. And so how do you see this as an opportunity to bring purpose into government, missions into government, rather than simply procedures?
No, I think that is a great question, and it bringing that the purpose in. I think that goes back to my earlier comments about being good humans, and so using AI to speed up, say, a benefits review process and some of those sorts of things, so that you do then ultimately at the end, you have the human in the loop, which our state leadership, we're still in session, so we're still waiting to see what comes out of session around any specific guidelines, but they have been very clear that they do not want, particularly things that are going to directly impact, the property rights, the lives, the financial security of Texans. They don't want that to be automated. And so that's going to be, for some agencies, a significant reskilling on that customer service aspect, right? And really reaching out and having that human in there to review those, to make sure that that they are having human, empathetic, compassionate interactions with the people that we serve. So I think we could see faster service delivery and hopefully better service delivery when folks are freed up from just looking at routine forms and actually able to interact with people.
Hi, thanks for coming today. I am curious about something practical we could tell students now. Let's say I'm a career services professional. I'm not, but let's pretend that I am, and I'm talking to a junior. What could I tell them about you as employers? Have you operationally integrated AI into your hiring practices? Is it part of your job postings? Is it part of your interview? Not just as a tool, but are you asking about AI in your interviews? And are you training your managers on how to assess where they should and shouldn't put up guardrails around AI for their teams?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny. I was having this conversation with some folks on our HR team, and you would think at Indeed, our HR team would be on the cutting edge, and like most organizations, they're not, right? And one of the things that we are, that we've done for a really long time is, we have, like resumes. You upload a resume on Indeed, right? Like we're parsing that, we're storing that data. We've done that for a really long time. We match resumes to job descriptions. We've done that for a really long time. I think the thing that's different, that's changing, and sort of where, even on the responsible, ethical part of this is, we've spent a lot of time trying to eliminate bias in, say, our hiring practices. And bias is a huge concern in AI, and I think that's actually where we're spending a lot of our time in training our managers. And practically, how do we sort of reskill ourselves to think about it? Is as we bring on more of the matching, as we bring on more of the upskilling, how do we make sure that like folks are looking for elements of unconscious bias from a third party that they think might be neutral, right? And trying to find ways to do that. And I could go on for hours. I don't have hours. I would love to. But I think that's really the part of it is it's like when you're offloading some of those decision makings to a third party, right? Like to your point, like keeping the human in the loop, that's how you sort of find and eliminate that bias. And like that's been a lot of our focus internally as we sort of retrain ourselves as a hiring organization.
I also would like to say, whether the knowledge and skills need to be demonstrated, whether you can use AI, really probably depends on whether that employer is giving you the tools, right? Like, so I work for Microsoft. I mean, we got some tools, and we should be using them. And so I think we're looking for people who are going to jump right on in there and use those tools. And I think you're also seeing like a shift in investment in the jobs, right? Like it's just changing over time where you're concentrating your hiring, right? Where you need the human and where the human can be supported by a co-pilot, right? And so you're just going to see naturally happening some shifts over time, whether that's deliberate or not deliberate. But the second thing I would say is we probably no longer ask people, do you know how to use the internet? I mean, like we just assume that you know how to use the internet. But if someone showed up and they could not use the internet, they would not long be in that job. And so I feel like it's going to be the same with AI, whether or not, whether you have to show it, it would depend on where the workplace you're going into. But whether you stay functionally at the top of your game is probably about whether or not you are open-minded and are able to incorporate the tools.
Yeah.
I was just going to say one quick practical thing that I learned from my kids who are graduating right now is make sure that your resume can be read by AI, and there's apparently a way to do that, and I'm sure the career services folks here at UT are doing that. I don't know how to do that, but I'm sure that there is a way because so many people are. So I will say there are certain agencies that are using some of that technology to scan those for the initial screenings. So I would make sure they're prepared for that.
Yeah, and the one last thing that I'd say is, especially for folks entering into, say, knowledge work, right? It's just a very challenging economic picture right now, especially in knowledge industries, knowledge-based industries. And so we may not ask, are you familiar with AI? Please demonstrate. But having those skills, having that say in your portfolio, having ways to show, like that will be a differentiator. So for the organizations that are hiring, right, and not many are in certain industries right now, like those types of skills will rise to the top.
Awesome. Last question, go ahead.
Okay, bear with me because I'm still trying. This is like a lot. It just opens up a lot of like things to think about. But I'm gonna try to frame this. Okay, so we talk a lot in education. You know, as an educator, thinking, fostering critical thinking, right? And we kind of all know what that is, but to kind of drill down into it, especially with AI and its ability to like synthesize, a lot of times it seems like what we do is we go, well, since we have that, AI has the ability to synthesize, it can reason, but what it can't do is draw upon, you know, your personal experiences, right? And so we kind of have like what I'm seeing as an avenue to have people kind of, you know, think about, okay, their personal experiences, what they think. But that's challenging, that's difficult, right? And it takes time. It takes time to contemplate, to, you know, form your own thoughts. And what I see in education is that we actually don't do that a lot because, you know, it tends to be time is money and, you know, you have an assignment. And a lot of times what I see with students, to be perfectly honest, is like, well, the easiest way to go about it is just to have AI do it, right? And you can even ask AI, hey, imagine that you were me, right? And draw from my personal experiences, right? And so that's like one of the challenges, especially as it gets kind of smarter, or I don't really think AI is smart, actually. I think it's kind of stupid, but it has a lot of data points. How do we slow down? If that's what we're asking, right? If the slowing down is implied in the contemplation, which I think probably is, right? How do we slow down, and to what extent do you feel like employers or, you know, government or nonprofits should embrace that slowing down and not the smooth, fast, efficient, like critical thinking? In other words, I guess, you know, do you feel that there's a responsibility for the private sector or government to embrace these challenges of what critical thinking really is?
Yes.
Does that make sense at all?
No, it does make sense. So because this is one of the, I think one of the things that we've been talking about this a lot in my agency, and I do a lot of stuff with the National Association of State CIOs, and I just got back from a conference, and we're all talking about this. And again, we're in an environment where, you know, everyone's talking about innovation, efficiencies, all these other things, which we want, and we want an efficient government, right? All that good stuff. But innovation for innovation's sake is not helpful, I don't think. And so, because, and I go back.
Can I just stop you? Can I just
Yeah,
ask you, do
yeah.
you feel like the idea of efficiency in government really, is that an ethical dilemma? Maybe it shouldn't be efficient, or do you have those types of conversations?
Sure, because I think that, okay, so yes, we have those conversations. You know, as we government not always known for being efficient, but we're using, you know, public dollars, taxpayer dollars. So that is certainly something that as taxpayers, we would like to know that our taxpayers or our tax dollars aren't being wasted, whatever that means, certainly by bureaucratic inefficiencies. Now I say that, I don't think bureaucrat is a bad word. Maybe it's because I am one, but I don't think it has to be a bad word. But I do think that, you know, looking at a government that, to me, it's more about, if you're looking at government, going back to that our product is customer service, and the real thing we're delivering, it's about hassle. You don't want to go to Target, Lowe's, wherever it is, and have to go through a million different, you know, lines, hassles, hoops that you're jumping through because you're going to give them your money to buy your thing and walk out. I think government should be the same way. It should be a little bit more efficient.
It should have a market.
It should, yeah. I think we have a market. I think we have a market. I think we have customers. I think we have all of those things. I do. But But that doesn't mean that there's not the human element to all the other things that I talked about. So when I'm talking about innovation for innovation's sake, is I don't think that that's always the right thing. Sometimes government gets hit over the head and we get criticized because we have legacy systems. Well, I would change the thinking on that, because sometimes the reason they're legacy is because they work, right? And they keep running. Like the stuff's on the mainframe because it works, and it's not some old mainframe. It's actually pretty new one, and it's working, and it's a thing that needs to work, and it doesn't have to necessarily be innovative. So to your point about slow down, I do think we have to slow down and have these conversations about things, and whether we have to use AI for everything, whether we have to innovate everything, or more importantly, I think innovation rather than just technological innovation, it needs to be mindset innovation and getting rid of legacy mindset, which I think is the biggest problem we have in government, more than legacy technology. I don't know that I answered your question, but that's my thoughts.
But are you sort of talking about, like, so bureaucracy was developed, right, to have a system and transparency in a system, and like that, and I feel like maybe I'm hearing in your, it's not just about the end point, but it's like that process is followed, and it becomes, sometimes the process has become so everyone's adding to a process, and then it becomes just like it's lost the reason for the process in the first place. But, and so I feel like when you're talking about critical thinking, you're saying we're doing a end run around the thinking process, and that's like, why should we be in such a rush, especially when we're teaching these students to get to that end process? Let's go through the journey, let's go through the process, and not just get to the answer. And I mean, I think you just raised a really good point, because I think in industry, they've got to get things out at the lowest cost and the highest output. And I think you just make a really good point. And I think we can bring this back to where we started, which is that people still need to be able to say that that answer that tool just gave me is wrong. And that's actually not the way we want to go. And we need to be able to look and see where the mistakes are. We need to see where it needs to serve us better. And so to get that, you need people who think and observe and question.
And have systems that embrace that, right? That it's not a sort of adversarial sort of thing, right?
Yeah, the conversation that I have a lot, and I was just having it this morning with our CTO, is like the difference between output and outcome, right? And AI can generate a lot more output, and it can be hit or miss if it's actually hitting the outcome, right? And I think the role here in a university in particular is like, what you're really teaching is like, how do you arrive to the outcome, right, that you're trying to get to? And honestly, for some things, like an LLM may get it absolutely right on the first try, right? And getting to that outcome in the most efficient way is using an LLM. Human still needs to check that, right? But if all you're focusing on the output, right, you might, we were talking about this earlier, you might generate, hundreds of new projects that have to all go to environmental review, and now you've just created a giant backlog, right? And that's sort of the difference between output and outcome that I think that like when you kind of look into the role of AI and where it's going, it's like right now we're really, really good at measuring the output and really, really at measuring the outcome, and that's the real challenge for the folks that are trying to shape this, is like, how do we understand what the difference between that and really focus on getting to that outcome as efficiently as we can.
Yep. Well, thank you all for the great questions. Many thanks to our fabulous panel. So big hand of applause for Robin Lerner from Microsoft, Amanda Crawford from State of Texas, Michael Redding from Indeed. Thank you all very much.